This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today. I'm your host, Jay Scott, and I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field experiencing God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today I wanted to talk to you about a few things before we get into the episode with Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources. We've got a great episode coming up today talking about elk and elk behavior. Chris is always a great guest on the podcast, one of the most favorite and requested guys on the podcast, so I know you guys are going to enjoy this episode. I wanted to cover a few things first. First thing is I do appreciate all the comments and all the positive feedback that I get from the podcast. Every day I get emails, text messages, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, phone calls from you guys telling me how much you enjoy the podcast. One thing I'm going to ask you to do is to make sure you subscribe in iTunes, Podbean, and Stitcher. Make sure you subscribe because that helps our placement with iTunes. Also, please give us 5-star ratings and good comments, which also helps our placement with iTunes. And I just appreciate all the positive comments and feedback. One of the things, if you do subscribe in iTunes, as soon as I load an episode on the Podbean server, it immediately gets downloaded to your device on iTunes. If you don't subscribe, sometimes it takes anywhere from 6 to 24 hours before you can listen to the episode. So just a little heads up there. Also, I've gotten probably 6 or 8 questions from guys asking about what I do for a living outside of the podcast and outside of hunting. And I figured I got the question enough that I would go ahead and answer that on this podcast. I got my real estate license in 1997 after graduating from Arizona State University, and I have been selling real estate ever since. I happen to work with some very experienced people. I work with my dad, Bill Scott, who's been in the business probably now over 30 years. I work with Dar Colburn, who is also my hunting partner and partner in the guide business, Colburn and Scott Outfitters. I believe Dar came on about 2000, and we've been selling real estate ever since. Also work new to the team is my nephew Jay Pyburn, and my primary focus has always been on residential land and developing properties. And ever since the market took a dive in 2008, my bread and butter business has been fairly slow, but I see some things starting to pick back up, and that's exciting. We are a full service real estate team, and Dar Colburn and my dad and Jay Pyburn, they sell houses, they rent houses. My dad's a property manager of over 70 some properties. We all have experience in property management, in residential resale, and basically a full service real estate office. If any of you guys listening need any real estate advice or need a market analysis on your property, or you're looking to buy or sell any real estate in Arizona, specifically in Metro Phoenix area, we definitely would like to talk to you. You can reach Dar Colburn or myself at 602-996-9910. We are with Realty Executives. Our office is in PV, basically at Tatum and Shea. I have been there since, I want to say, 1999. So we've been established there in the area for a long time. Like I said, we have experience in buying and selling rental properties, managing rental properties, buying and selling many residential houses, and then also the focus in land and land development. So appreciate that question. Hopefully that answers that for you guys. If you have any real estate concerns or needs, you can email me at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can email Dar Colburn at Darr Colburn Colburn at AOL.com, and we'd be happy to help you with any of your real estate needs. I want to thank our listeners for those questions. I also wanted to talk to you about a friend of mine, Jeremy Gugelmeyer, operates a business, a guide business called sagebrushhunts.com, and he does a great job with hunts, and he has a ranch. He does a lot of antelope hunts, whitetail hunts, mule deer hunts, elk hunts. But he has sent me a message. He has a Northeast New Mexico antelope hunt, 3 days, fully guided. Northeast New Mexico. These hunts take place on a 57,000 acre ranch. This ranch is very well managed and is hunted for very conservatively. The ranch has some of the best antelope country a guy is going to find in New Mexico. The ranch conditions this year is one of the wettest springs on record to make conditions the best they've been in years. This is a 3 day fully guided 2-on-1 hunt. Price has been reduced to $3,000, no draw required. He has 3 spots left. The dates for that he has available are September 1st through the 3rd. But he could do any 3 days from September 1st through 11th. His preference would be September 1st through the 3rd. This is someone that I know very, very well. I call him a close personal friend. He is one of the good guys in the business, and he's a very, very honest and very straightforward, straight shooter. You might check his website out at sagebrushhunts.com. You can reach Jeremy at 806-333-4358. You can email him at sagebrushhunts@hotmail.com. He's a guy that I've hunted with before, and he puts on great hunts. Him and his wife are 2 fine individuals, and I can't recommend them enough. Guys, I also want to talk about my sponsors of this podcast, and I think it's important for you guys to know that the podcast exists because of the sponsors. Without the sponsors, I probably wouldn't be able to perform this podcast as good as it is. And I want to thank them. First, Deadeye Outfitters. You need to go on deadeyeoutfitters.com and check out their awesome shirts, t-shirts, hats, hoodies. Chris Lacey, who is from Nevada, is the artist that designs and does a lot of the great artwork. Chris is world renowned for his wildlife artistry. He does a lot of the mural paintings that you see if you've ever been in Cabela's stores. He's been on the covers of the catalogs of Cabela's, and he's a fine wildlife artist. Nikolai Kavilia, one of the owners as well. One of the things that's so cool about Deadeye is that they're all hunters, and Chris and Nikolai specifically live in Nevada and have hunted all over the West. We had a podcast episode with Nikolai, and his love for hunting runs deep, as well as Chris Lacey, who many of you know from harvesting lots of great trophies across the West. He's a Boone and Crockett scorer. Deadeye Outfitters also has the exclusive licensing for all the Boone and Crockett apparel. So over the next year, there's lots of great things going on with this company, and if you go on and check out their hats, they've got some cool designs, and their shirts and hoodies and sweatshirts and all sorts of stuff. So now, if you order something at Deadeye Outfitters, or when you purchase something, If you use the promo code JScott, you will automatically receive a 10% discount on all of your orders. And so I want you guys to go look at their site. They've got some awesome stuff, and use the promo code, and that will get you a 10% discount. And I want to thank Deadeye Outfitters. They've got an awesome Instagram page. They've got over 50,000 followers, and they do great work. So please support them. And I also want to thank GoHunt.com Insider. They have been supporting this podcast for some time, and they do great work. And being a Go Hunt Insider member, if you're a member, you get exposed to all sorts of hunts that they give away. They just gave away a 22,500 valued Doll sheep hunt with Nahanni Butte Outfitters, and they also got $2,500 in travel expenses. So that's an all expenses paid hunt, and the only stipulation was that it was to insider members. So that's a hunt that if you're an insider member, you have a chance. A GoHunt.com insider member just has a chance to win. They're kind of doing some groundbreaking stuff here. In the month of July, they're giving away four tags in 4 weeks, and they've already given away a fantastic antelope hunt last week. This week for Go Hunt Insider members, this is the week 2 landowner tag giveaway, July 14th through the 19th. New Mexico Unit 10 rifle elk tag. Hunt dates are October 17th through the 21st of this year. It has a retail value of $4,000. The description of the tag: most bulls harvested here are in the 300 to 350 range, but there are Boone and Crockett bulls harvested in this unit every year. This is also one of the easier units to hunt in the state, since it has plenty of public land with elk found all throughout the area. Rolling hills, thick pinyon juniper cover, and pockets of ponderosa pine make this terrain easier for hunters to hike and cover on foot. So this is a great chance to win a hunt. All you have to do is be a Go Hunt Insider member and register, and they're going to be giving away 2 more hunts after this one. And they also have just a slew of landowner tags on their website, and there's 154 available tags. Just briefly looking at this here, there's a Colorado Unit 12 third rifle elk. This is a trespass hunt, $1,600. If you just scroll down here, there's a Colorado Unit 75 4th rifle deer tag, $4,500. There's a New Mexico Unit 17 archery elk tag, fully outfitted, $10,500. I'm just going to scroll down, just randomly pick some here. There's a New Mexico Unit 13 archery elk tag, fully outfitted, for $9,500. There is a Arizona Unit 17 archery deer over the counter hunt, $4,500. There's New Mexico Unit 12 private land only archery elk tag, fully outfitted, for $8,000, and hundreds more. So you can go view those hunts on GoHunt.com. If you join the GoHunt.com Insider, you have a chance to get a discount on all the landowner tags. But not only that, you have a chance to be in the drawing for all of the great giveaways. So I want to thank GoHunt.com Insider for supporting the podcast and being such a great sponsor. And I look forward to the future, and I want to thank you guys, our listeners, and let's get right to the episode with Chris Rowe. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we're fortunate to have Chris Rowe of Roe Hunting Resources again on the podcast. And I had so much great feedback from the podcast episode that Chris and I did a while back that I thought I would have him on again. He brings a lot of expertise to the table, and I'm proud to have him on again. Chris, how you doing?
Doing all right, my friend. How are you?
Oh, doing just fine. We're getting closer and closer to elk season. Every day that goes by is another one we're getting closer, so I'm getting excited.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
That's awesome. Chris, I know you've just recently uploaded a video to YouTube and basically talks about a topic we briefly talked about in the last episode about why it matters, meaning the actual sounds and calls you make. You believe that it does matter, when you use those and what sounds you're making. Talk to me a little bit about that video that you just uploaded on YouTube.
Well, like you said, from our last discussion, some people listened to it, and I got a lot of feedback from it as well. There's two schools of thought, and in general, they are, there's a camp of folks that believe that it really does not matter what you're saying. So if I go out in the woods or in the hills or whatever, and I give a cow call, so let's just say I give a lost mew. People use the terminology lost mew. All right, so I give a lost mew. Well, does it really matter if I know exactly what that is meaning, or is it more important to just be, really good with my calling and give quality sounds and use quality calls and just put a lot of feeling and emotion into your calling? All right. So there's the camp that says it doesn't really matter. You just want to sound good, and you want to sound like you have a lot of emotion, and you're, really pleading in your calling.
And I think, before you go into the next one, I think I would fall into the category of I haven't thought about it enough to know why it matters or to think about why it matters. And you really opened the door on our last conversation. I've always felt like I have great sounds, but to be honest with you, a lot of times I don't even know what sound I'm making. I'm just making a good sound.
There you go.
I'm kind of in the middle because I am of a belief that it really does matter. And going through the elk module on Roe Hunting Resources after our conversation, it really started, making me want to know more and learn more about what actual sounds to make, because I feel like I can make good sounds. I just need to know when to make them.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with something you just mentioned, in the fact that there are a lot of successful elk hunters out there, and whether you're a calling instructor or just your caller or you're an elk hunter or whatever, or a guide or outfitter or whatever, there are some just phenomenally successful folks out there that they don't know what it is that they're saying. They've never put any stock in it. They don't care. They just say, I sound good and I'm successful, so that's really all that matters. Well, and again, this is a controversial topic. I mean, it really is. You can get some people that are just vehement about, no, it doesn't. You're just talking voodoo. But the reason why I dove into it with this video is because when I sit and have a conversation with folks, and I provide some, whether it's biological background information to it, or even if I just put it in context with you and I and how we are in our conversations and communication, like you said, it really opens people's eyes to going, well, wait a minute, no, maybe it does matter. Now, granted, I know that there's other people out there that talk about, vocalizations and communication and what certain things mean. And I even say right in the video, listen, I know that there's other people out there that say that talk about this stuff, and quite honestly, I understand, some folks look at it and say, oh, I don't agree with that. Well, I don't agree with a lot of what some of these other folks are talking about either. I understand that, but like we talked about in the last one, that's why I have the video of the elk doing what I'm talking about in the elk module. It's not me flapping my gums. It's the elk themselves doing it. You can see their body language. You can hear them. You can see the outcome of that interaction. But for me, absolutely it matters. If you want to be more successful, yes, it absolutely matters.
And from your background of being a wildlife biologist, I mean, you are an avid archery elk hunter, and you are an avid elk caller. You do lots of seminars all over the Southwest. But what I find interesting about the elk module is the fact that it seems that you bring it all the way back full circle to the biology aspect of here is a cow making an assembly mew. This is what it sounds like. And it's like, oh, now I kind of understand. I hear that all the time, but in her cadence and in her tone, this is what she's inferring. When a lot of people, including myself, just hear a cow call and go, that's a cow calling.
Yeah.
You are taking it a whole step and whole different level of trying to understand the actual communications, because within those communications, the tone and the sound of every cow is going to be different, but maybe the number of times she calls, or that's what intrigues me.
Structure.
It's structure. It's not just, you and I could sit there and you could say, do it like this 3 times, and I'm going to sound different than you, but we could both achieve the same results because all cows sound different.
Yes, and that's it. The structure of the vocalization. I talk about the long mew. There's so many things you just said that have my brain racing. So, for instance, like the lost mew. If we talk about the lost mew, and you hold or you emphasize that high note and you come off on the low note, very quickly. It does not matter if you're very, very super, super high, or you're a medium pitch, or you're kind of a lower pitch. If you're holding the higher note and then falling, that structure of that vocalization is going to relay a certain meaning. Or if we talk about the assembly mew, which is the mirror opposite of that, you're talking very, very short on the high note, that you drag out that low note, all right? That structure of the vocalization, it doesn't matter if I'm using a mouth diaphragm doesn't really lend itself to a assembly mew, but if I'm using, say, an open reed style call, I can do it on a single reed, I can do it on a double reed, I can do it with a tone converter, I can do it muffled in my hand. It doesn't matter what it ultimately sounds like is from a standpoint of sound quality or pitch or anything like that, but if the structure is the same, then that vocalization is going to mean the same. And what really got my brain racing is you talk about bringing it full circle. And I talk about that in this YouTube video. If folks want to check it out, they can either go to our YouTube channel, and it'll be right there at the top, and that's just Roe Hunting Resources in the YouTube channel. But it's Mastering Your Elk Calling. Doesn't really matter if you know what you're saying. And so in there, I talk about that exact fact of bringing it full circle. And for me, what that means is there are a lot of folks that either take all of their learning or base all of their conclusions on what they're hearing and what they see with elk, all from essentially September. They go elk hunting, they engage elk, they hear things, they see things, and that's how they make their conclusion. Well, in a bunch of my different videos, I talk about correlation is not necessarily causation. Just because you see something happen or hear something happen at a certain time does not mean two things are related.
But it's very easy, I think, to hear it and see a reaction and go, that's what caused that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I talk about that in depth in I've got you've watched it, the series Understanding Bull Vocalizations and Communication, when I talk about the glunk. The glunk, I think, is probably the most misunderstood vocalization that a bull elk can do, and it really was not until Kelly and I sat, and Kelly's the one that really, I think, she discovered it, really teased it out. We sat there, we've got, I don't know how many hours of video, and you just, bulls glunk, 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 glunking. And it wasn't until she was going through them, she was like, wait a minute, I think it means this. And we started looking at it, and I'm like, what? Yeah, and so we started going back through and pulling all of our video and trying to, and we talk about, you can never prove a behavioral theory or a vocalization theory to be correct. The only things you can do is disprove it, all right? And I talk about that in depth on some of the videos. But regardless, we went back through and tried to disprove all the other things that we had ever heard or believed about a glunk, and we started just knocking them out of the water. We're like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it, because there were so many inconsistencies. But when it all boiled down to it, we realized, wait a minute, no, it's very, very simple. But it still relates to all these other things, but it doesn't necessarily mean, glunk people say, oh, it attracts cows. Oh, it's for keeping cows. Oh, it's for, asserting dominance. Oh, it's for imprinting on cows. Nope. It means stay. It means stay. And we can sit there and I can show you that repeatedly, and it works every single time. And so, yes, what you're saying is when you go out in the field and you see, I make a call, a bull responds, and he runs me over. Well, it's easy to say, oh, okay, well, that call must mean this, and that's what he wanted.
It's kind of like fishing, and you throw a cast out with one fly and you get a fish. You're like, okay, that's what they want. Well, maybe that's what just that one wanted.
There you go.
It doesn't necessarily mean that's what every fish wants.
There you go. And so when you said full circle, what it means to me is there are so many variables in September. When you throw testosterone and raging estrogen in the cows, going crazy with those reproductive hormones going on, that throws such a wild card in the mix. I mean, you've got, the differences in the cows, you got difference in the bulls, you have sex ratio, age class, hunter pressure, environmental factors. There's so many variables that you cannot control or even remotely account for. What I did is I said, okay, fine. I'm going to eliminate all that. Skip September. I'm going to ignore end of August. I'm going to ignore September, and I'm going to ignore October. What do elk do in December? What do they do in January? What do they do in March, June, July? What are they doing the entire rest of the year? And can we tease out what's going on then? At those times of year, you don't have hunting pressure. The elk are a lot more relaxed. You have there's no reproductive hormones going that are going to throw anything. When you go kind of to that off season, if you will, and start really spending time teasing out with video and audio, just start teasing out vocalizations and communication, then you start to see that, wait a minute, there are set vocalizations that mean very, very specific things that always, always, always have the exact same expectation, result, whether it elicits a response or whether it elicits an action from another animal. They are consistent. Well, if they're consistent in November, as they are in January, as they are in July, then why wouldn't they be consistent in September? And now you can go from the point of, I don't really, I throw something out there in this case and a bull runs me over. I go to the next ridge. I do the exact same call. And not only do I get ignored, the elk just turn around and leave and walk away.
So that's why it matters.
And I'll even go beyond that from a standpoint, okay, well, maybe we don't like what, you make a vocalization. They didn't like what they heard, and I talk about, they didn't like what you were selling. I'll give an example of a guy in a produce department of a grocery store. If somebody jumps up on their produce stand and starts yelling pencils and automobiles and bootlaces and winter jackets, it makes sense that we all understand that those words don't go together and they don't make sense. But more importantly, does it change our behavior? And so in some cases, we go out into the field, and this is, I think, really especially true when we're dealing with over-the-counter units on heavily hunted public ground where there's a lot of people calling. And the elk are generally a little bit more wary anyway. And you've got what we talked about before, where you got those bull, say down in your area where you got so many stinking bulls that, heck, you're almost tripping over bulls in some cases. Whereas in some of the areas in whether it's Idaho, Colorado, New Mexico, wherever, Wyoming, where you've got some of these other units where you might have 10 bulls per 100 cows or 15 bulls per 100 cows. You don't have that many bulls out there. So when you're out there and you start calling, yes, we're trying to get them to do what we want them to do with our vocalizations. We want to be attractive. We want to get them to come in. But if we vocalize with something and they just don't like what we're saying, well, if they don't like what we're saying simply because they're not interested in it. So, for instance, if I gave them a vocalization and that vocalization was dead on accurate within the context of where I was calling from and the context of what I was saying to that animal, and that animal is like, no, I'm not interested in coming over to you, well, that's fine. But if it all makes sense, then the animal just goes back to doing whatever it is he's doing, and he just continues on his way. He does not change his behavior, and I can back out. I can regroup. I can come back in and work him that afternoon. If that doesn't work, I can back out. I can come back. I can work him the next morning, and I can figure out what strategy is needed to get that animal to work, but I don't change his behavior. Whereas some of us go out there and we just start throwing stuff out there and hoping to see kind of what sticks. Well, if the animal does not like what we're selling, that's fine. But if we stand out too badly, or if we call in such a manner to where they're like, wait a minute, that's not right, you can actually not only have that animal not respond favorably to your calling, but in fact, turn and leave, or just absolutely modify their behavior. So now it didn't work. My calling strategy didn't work on this animal, this morning. So I back out and I leave and I come back that evening and I hope to work that animal again. And nope, he's gone. He's up and over the ridge and he left. Now I've got to go find another elk.
Right.
So yeah.
So you've totally blown your opportunity.
Yeah.
And not even have the opportunity to go back and re-engage with him. You've screwed the pooch in essence, and he's gone.
Exactly. And it, obviously, and I kind of just this. This day and age, the fitness, the hunter athlete and the super fitness minded athlete or hunter, a lot of people talk about, having your fitness to the ultimate level, so that way you can go back farther and hunt harder and hunt longer and cover more ground. And well, okay, that's and quite honestly, I think a lot of that is a symptom of the fact that people are not capitalizing on the animals as they run into them. So they have to, run this ridge to that ridge, to that ridge, to that ridge, always looking for the next elk, trying to find another elk that's willing to play their game.
So instead of more efficiently being able to communicate and work the different animals, the mindset is the better shape that I'm in, the more country that I can cover, which means I don't have to be near as efficient and effective with my calling and with my setups, and I'm just going to run them down.
I'm going to run them down, and I'm going to at some point stumble into an elk that is willing to work and do what I want, willing to come to my call. Yes, I truly believe that. It's different. And some people have actually said it.
And so it's different than someone saying, I'm going to live and die by the bugle. This is more of I'm going to just not learn why I need to improve my hunting skill of communicating with the animals and knowing behaviorally what they're doing. I'm going to take that weakness and try and be as in good a shape as I can to just try and run into as many elk as I can, and one of them's going to end up biting.
Yes, and I know, and Jay, I'm telling you right now, I know darn well that what we're talking about right now in our belief structure, or I'm not even going to throw it on you. I'll own it. I'll own it. I mean, I will own it because this is truly what I believe. I see it all the time, and I talk to so many people that, yes, they don't, their toolbox, if you will, of knowledge and skill set and what they can do with their calls is limited. And so literally that is what they are left with is in the video, I give an example. I'm like, okay, we go into this basin. We're in this long valley. There are 10 elk in this valley. We might not know that to start out, but the fact remains is, yes, there are 10 elk in this valley. Some of us go out there and we just call and we hope that something sticks. And what we're hoping to do is run that valley at some point and hope that we find the one bull in the valley that's willing to play our game. Whereas if I, from my belief set and what I talk about is I want to go into that same valley and be able to work every single one of those bulls. If I come to that first bull and I find out, oh, he has cows, so I have to, work him a certain way. Well, now I can. If I go to the next bull and find out, oh, he's off on his own and he's a mature bull, okay, I can work him. I go to the next bull. Oh, it's a younger bull off on his own. He just got ran out from, this other group. He's really call shy. He's a little nervous. Well, that's fine. I know how to work him. I can go into that valley and I can work all 10 bulls without having to run that whole stinking system hoping to find that one animal. Because the thing that always, the one common denominator, I guess people would not still be going to elk calling seminars if people were having extreme success with elk, with what they're getting from elk calling seminars. People are going out in the field each year. They're trying new stuff. They're doing whatever they can do, but they're not getting success with it. And so especially if you're a beginning hunter, if you're not getting success, and you've got I would have to think that you would agree with this, especially from a fishing standpoint. If you're not seeing success from what you are doing, your confidence level just starts to nosedive. And if you are out in the field, you just hiked in 4 miles with a heavy backpack to get into where you think the elk should be. You're tired, you're sore now, you're into camp, you start hunting, and after a couple days, you're either not finding the elk or the elk just aren't working or they're not doing what you want them to do. Your confidence level just starts just taking a nosedive to where it's going to be harder for you to get up in the morning and get out of that sleeping bag. It's going to be harder for you to stay out all day if you need to. It's going to be harder to convince yourself, no, I need to stay out here until dark and, maybe hike back to camp in the pitch black. It starts to wear on your psychological wherewithal, if you will. And so, no, if you take the next step to learn, in my opinion, say, I want to know behavior. I want to know what these vocalizations mean, and I want to know how I'm supposed to how the elk use them, not how I'm supposed to use them, how the elk use them. Then right from the get-go, you have more confidence because I've already seen an elk. I've seen 6 videos of elk doing this vocalization, and I've seen 6 results of that vocalization. I know for a fact the elk say this, and I know for a fact this is what they perceive, and this is what they are expecting. So now, not only am I more confident, the likelihood of you actually having a favorable interaction when you do call goes through the roof to where now your confidence is a lot better and your effectiveness and your efficiency goes up a lot better as well.
I've got a couple comments to talk about what you're just saying, and one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because of the exact reason you're talking about. I am a student of the game in fishing, in golf, in hunting, in, you break hunting down, turkey hunting, elk hunting, deer hunting, whatever it is. I played golf, played college golf, played in high school, was a student of the game of golf. I've loved fishing ever since I was a little kid. I am a student of the game. A couple comments I would have is I can't understand logic of some people that will spend, $100 a month on supplements and new gym memberships and, all the different things. While those are great things, they totally neglect and disregard trying to improve one of the main fundamental hunting skills, which is being able to learn a behavior of the animal you're hunting and be able to communicate with that animal. Okay, so I started this podcast because I am a student of every game that I play. I want to know everything that I possibly can. I am an analytical person, but I believe that the more that I can learn, the better off I will be. I am the first one to ask a fly fishing guide in a boat next to me when we're sitting at the takeout, how was your day? How'd you do? I'm trying to learn. I'm not trying to pick their brain and be a snob, and I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to say, man, I'll just say I flat between 10 and 2. I struggled. I couldn't figure out what those fish are doing. Some guy says, oh, they're on, BWO emergers, or they're doing this. And I'm like, I didn't, So the reason I started this podcast is I figured that with my analytical mind and my inquisitive mind and wanting to be a student of the game, that I could have great guests on like yourself, and I could have the conversation to learn myself, but also make it in an engaging, entertaining way, informational way that people could get something out of it. Um, and, that's where, I've elk hunted for a long time, and I would say I, I am as confident in my elk hunting and elk calling ability as probably anybody else out there, and the results that I've gotten over the years have been, great and very good. But guess what? I learn every day, and that's why when I found Roe Hunting Resources elk module, it like opened up a whole new world, because I had spent so much time. I think this year will be 20 years, taking the entire month of September off and listening to elk and videoing elk. But the older I get, the more I understand, the less I know.
Yeah.
Meaning,
Yeah.
I have a lot to learn, and I feel like I'm as a proficient elk guide and elk hunter as probably, anyone out there. But one thing that I never really understand is there's a lot of guides and there's a lot of hunters out there that hunt every year, and they don't know how to call. They don't know how to call well, and they don't even try.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Keep going. I'm with you.
And so, from talking about the fitness, I've gotten several emails, because in these podcast episodes, I guess I have been critical of those that are, into extreme fitness. One of the things I'd like to say is it's not that I'm against extreme fitness. It's that I'm against, why not spending some of that time learning how to call and communicate with the animals that you're hunting. And I'm not picking on any one particular person. I've just had enough feedback from people that they just don't get it.
Well,
and just because you can run 6 ridges over does not mean you can kill an elk. Now, if you can communicate very well and know what the animal's behavior and what to say at the right time, and run 6 ridges over and, do 10,000 vertical feet in a morning, then you're that much better.
Well,
but it seems they totally disregard one and go full steam in the other. And you go, well, have you practiced your elk calling, or have you learned what those elk are saying? You use the J Scott, JSO podcast promo code, or J Scott Outdoors, whatever the promo code is with Roe Hunting Resources. You get the elk module for $20.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they'll go spend hundreds on a new road bike and all this stuff to get in shape, but they won't spend $20. And I'm not saying they don't, because you have a lot of members, but the logic, I just don't understand.
Because in Jay, I don't want to shut you down, but I mean the reason being, I think, is because two things. Number one, if you spend money, you just bought something tangible. I can hold it. I have a new. I've got new camo. I've got new clothes. I've got a new bow. I've got whatever. I've got something new. It's something tangible. It's something that I've done that I can show that I have done different from last year. And the fitness thing, I think, is very similar in the fact that if I'm taking supplements and I'm running and biking, hiking, and everything else, that yes, I tangibly can feel I'm better. I can tangibly measure the fact that I can hike farther now and I can run better and I feel better. So now I can cover more ground. That is a tangible, real thing that you can grasp, or at least wrap your head around. The problem is knowledge, not so much. You don't know. You can spend all the time in the world you want trying to gain knowledge, but you do not know if you have that knowledge until you test it. And so it's intangible until the moment of truth. And so if you don't have the confidence, everything up to that point has deteriorated your confidence in calling, or your confidence in ability of working animals. You don't have the confidence to actually put the material in play. A couple great examples. One was an Elk Mod member. He subscribed. He had seen one of my seminars. I think it was a seminar guy. He subscribed. In the elk mount, I talk about, we talked about the doorway principle, all right? And I talked about the see you first, hear you second, smell you third. Well, he went out in the field, learned all that stuff, but in the back of his mind, he was like, I don't know. And so he did everything absolutely perfect, but then he was like, I second-guessed myself, and I stuck a decoy out. And he stuck the decoy out, but it wasn't by any, it was just kind of a last minute, I'll just throw it here and see if that helps. Well, the elk came right around. The elk did exactly what I said it was going to do, what the behavior said it was going to do. Everything was right smack dab down the line until that bull stepped around and saw that decoy, and the bull stopped and stared at the decoy, just like we talk about. And the bull turned and never gave the guy a shot, only because the bull stopped when he saw the decoy. And the guy wrote, he's like, you know what? Ditch the decoy, work the setup. Now, I'm not poo-pooing decoys. I use them and I still have them, and I talk about that. However, in the wrong situation, it can be a detriment. In this case, the point I'm making is he learned all the information, but he doubted. He was like, I don't know. I don't know. And so he just kind of hedged his bets. And I understand why people doubt, because, again, there are other folks out there talking about stuff. And even you and I, logically, we listen to some of these other folks and we're like, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. Well, again, like we talk about, that's why I put the elk in, I'm videoing elk doing it, so you're not listening to me. But I'm telling you,
what you're saying is, don't take my
yes.
word for it. Take the elk's word for it.
Yes, exactly. And what you said there with the fitness, I'm in the same boat with you. I'll tell you right now, I am not in shape. I'm not near in shape that I need to be. So I'm not going to criticize those guys that are in shape, because I remember when I was in shape, it made my hunt a heck of a lot more enjoyable. However, not only is it, yes, if you can run 3 ridges and find an elk that's playing your game, that's fine. But another thing that we talk about, or I've talked about before, is the fact that my experience and where the genesis, if you will, the core fundamental start of all of my philosophy came from the fact that I am a solo hunter. I have to call the elk myself, to me, to kill. And then more importantly, I hunt on some have hunted on some very, very tough public ground that was heavily, heavily hunted. And literally, I was in college at the time, and I would leave Friday night, I would get in camp at 11 o'clock at night, or at the trailhead 11 o'clock at night, hike in about 2, 3 in the morning, and then I would have Saturday to hunt and Sunday morning. That's it. And so I had to figure out how to be a lot more effective and a lot more efficient. And what I see today is people not focusing on efficiency, but rather focusing on their physical abilities. Not only are they just running past a lot of elk, but unfortunately, some of these guys, because they just want to run and gun and they want to find an elk that'll play their game, they're just burning through habitat, negatively impacting the elk along the way. And so for guys like me, new hunters, people out there with kids, okay, they cannot go 5 ridges over. They have this ridge. But now you just burned through this ridge and you created such a disturbance that now you just made it tough, or even tougher, for everybody else that's down there. Now, granted, I understand people are like, well, I don't care. I'm going to get my elk, and that's my business. Well, that's fine. But like we talked about last episode, I would much rather deal with 10 guys in the field in the same valley that know what they're doing than 1 or 2 guys that don't. Because the impact is that much greater. And I've got to believe for you, as being a guide, when you have some of these people that drew a tag that took them 20 years to draw, my gosh. The impact there has got to be, the stress level's got to be huge. Because,
one of the things, one of the reasons why I only do 14-day hunts, so our archery season in Arizona is 14 days, and the reason that I only do 14-day hunts is I recognize that, 1, the tags are hard to come by and they've waited a long time to draw that tag, and 2, that they need to make the most of their time, and they don't need to be limited by a 7-day hunt. In my opinion, on limited draw hunts, guys that book a 7-day hunt are making a very big mistake, because in Arizona, speaking specifically, you are going to get some hunts that are interrupted by people. You're going to get some hunts that are interrupted by lightning storm or by whatever kind of, downpour rain or what happened, or something happens and your truck breaks down, or there's going to be outside influences that are going to ruin some sessions of your hunt. So I think that's why it's important to do 14-day hunts and to try and reduce the stress level, knowing that, with that amount of time, you have basically, I call them 28 sessions, a morning and an evening, because I don't hunt much during the day unless it's really peak rut. And it just gives them a little bit of sense of, okay, we can get this done. And, we try and be efficient with all of our setups, with all of our mornings and our evenings. But yeah, I mean, efficiency, being a student of the game like I am, and learning every single time I go out, and learning from, guys like you and others, I can pick something up and become more efficient by learning. And I think, I'm hoping that the younger generation that is getting into the sport, with all of the influences that we have to be, macho and fit, half of that I think is a young man's mentality to, be the fittest guy out there. And that is fantastic. And I would say when I was 22 years old, I might have been in the same category. As I get older, I realized that every year that I get older, I'm going to have to work harder, one, to be in shape, but number two, I realize that being more effective and efficient is paramount. It's more important than being able to go 36 miles in one day. Being able to work that specific elk and be efficient with that elk, the older I get, is more important to me.
Yeah, and I'm kind of sitting here chuckling to myself. For me, I don't want people to think that I'm some just grumpy old man.
Me too.
Because I'm not. It's just it's not, by all means, it's not. I've talked to so many hunters, and it's not that we're talking about these huge revelatory, these earth-shattering things. Sometimes it's just one little thing that somebody didn't think about and say, again, the doorway principle or the see you first principle, or whether it's the meaning of a certain vocalization or whatnot. It just, people are like, oh, it's the light bulb that goes off. One of your listeners signed up from the last podcast, and I'm not gonna give his name. I'll just read what he said. And he goes, and it's an email, and I spend a lot of time hunting and guiding elk hunters in Arizona. And I believe you have some of the best content on the web. It's really cool, and I wish I would have found this about 15 years ago. And that is probably the most common statement I hear from.
Well, and that's the revolution that I found, the epiphany of, oh my gosh, nobody else is explaining this in this type of fashion. And so I can agree with his sentiment. I totally agree with that email. I mean, that's the way I felt when I found it.
Whether or not you are a student of, a lover of the game or a student of the game, like you said, and I kind of agree with that. I'm the same way. Whether you're that type of person, or whether you're just starting out, or whether you're just somebody that just is not happy with the level of consistency that they're getting, if you spend a little time working on your efficiency in what you're doing, it is going to blow the doors wide open on your success level and your confidence level and your enjoyment out in the field. And quite honestly, well, that just ended that. I mean, it just, the people, when you sit there and you go, I heard a bull, I can go in and I can call him in. I mean, it's very fun for me to listen to folks that come back and they go, oh my gosh, there was this bull, I did this, I walked in, I gave him that targeted strategy, and boom, put him in my lap. And it wasn't a bull that I wanted, so I went to the next bull. And this is public ground, And then, I went to the next bull, and it was a great 6x. Boom, we killed that one, and then my buddy killed that one, and oh my gosh, then we had to figure out how to get him out, and that's the type of enjoyment that I really do. I really enjoy hearing that from folks. So I don't want people thinking I'm just a grumpy old man that, I enjoy people being successful, and I think that they can be successful fairly easily if they just tweak a couple of little things that they think or what they know and how they implement some of that knowledge.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely right there with you, and I have some phenomenal support, and the listeners are, they support the podcast and support what I'm doing unbelievably. There's a few probably out there that are thinking I'm going to send Jay an email as soon as this is over and tell him, about, you need to be in fit, and I am not arguing that you don't need to be fit. Please understand what Chris and I are both saying is we're just talking about being more of a student of the game and being more efficient and being able to understand animal behavior and to be able to communicate with the animals. In my mind, being older than I was 20 years ago, I understand, in my opinion, that is more important now. And I wish 20 years ago I would have, been more efficient.
Well, I tell you what, we could just use this. We've all seen, whether it's a Facebook meme or we've heard people talk about, you'll see some guy with a big upper body, big arms, big chest, and these skinny little chicken legs, and it says, never forget leg day, never skip leg day. Well, okay, I tell you what, that's fine. Be fitness, do that. Absolutely be fit. However, don't forget brain day. Don't forget to work that muscle or that gray matter as well. Don't forget to work the brain, because that is going to be, and we joked about it, the fact that, that's fine. You can get to the top of the mountain in record time. You stand on the top of the ridge and then it's now what? Okay,
yeah.
You got there. That's fine. Now what? All right. So don't skip brain day.
Meanwhile, the old guy comes sauntering up and finally gets up there and makes 3 calls, and the elk's standing at 10 yards and he whacks him, and it's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Or more worse yet, the guy kills it at quarter mile from the trailhead and he's already back in his truck.
Yeah. Well, that's all great stuff, and to be quite honest with you, I want to talk to you a little bit about the moon phase. Originally, we were going to talk about moon phase and its effect on the rut. And I am of the opinion that the moon phase, from a behavioral standpoint, as it affects the rut, what I can tell you is what I've noticed in full moon situations, it seems as though the elk rut like crazy at night when we're not obviously allowed to hunt them. They go to their beds early. They head to the thick country early, and they are less vocal and such during the day because they've been partying all night. I notice, I'm looking at the 2015 September map here, and it looks like the full moon is on the 28th of September, and it looks like the new moon is on the 14th. Well, the way that affects the Arizona archery elk hunt, most hunts in Arizona start on September 11th on a Friday, and they go till September 24th, and then the early rifle hunt is the 25th, then through the October 1st, a Thursday. So that full moon is going to fall right during most of the early rifle hunts in Arizona. I'm curious from a wildlife biology standpoint what you feel the full moon has to do with the rut.
All right, well, before I dive into that, again, I'm laughing because I think after this we just might as well dive into which is the best broadhead to use, because why don't we just
cover the most controversial
topic? Let's just stack all the controversial discussions in one. Yeah, all right. That is funny. Well, all right. Before I give you my opinion, I want you to go back to what you just said. All right. Now, I may or may not agree with anything or what you just said here, but you said, if I heard you correctly, that, in paraphrasing, that when you see the full moon, that they're rutting like crazy.
Correct.
And then you went down the list of what you see to as that's correlated with it. They're bugling at night, they're going to bed early, they're not as vocal during the day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
All right.
And conversely, during, let's say, mid-September when it's dark, I see them bugling less at night and bugling much more during the day and much more active during the day. So in huntable hours, I prefer to hunt in darker moons if the rut has already started.
Okay. Well, and that right there, I think is the crux of the controversy, because you hear people talking all the time about moon phase and the rut, but then when they say rut, people are talking about, in my opinion, talking about apples and oranges. Some people are talking about the rut, and they're actually talking about estrus cycling. But then other people are talking about, quote unquote, the rut, and what they're talking about is the observed behavior and activity of the elk that they're seeing out there. And again, this is where we go back to correlation is not necessarily causation. They link the two and say, well, because I hear a lot of bugling, because I see a lot of activity, and I see a behavior change, that must mean, therefore, then that the estrus cycling has changed. If it changed with the full moon, then it must have changed with the estrus cycling. Therefore, the full moon affects the estrus cycling, and there is zero scientific data to suggest that. Now, I'll just throw that out there, because there's people that have. I mean, I'm looking at hold up. I'm holding it in my hand. I've got it. Here's the book. It's the book in my hand, written by Bernie Taylor, and I don't mind giving this book out because I think it's bunk. But it's called Biological Time, and this book was written basically showing all these correlations with moon phase and serotonin levels and melatonin levels and hormone changes, blah 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 blah, blah, and enzyme secretions and such from fish and from all sorts of stuff. The problem is, as far as I know, and I just recently looked up some of this stuff, and I haven't seen any change. And as far as I know, no one has ever been able to show any either medical or concrete biological, physiological effect of moon phase on reproductive cycling of estrus. Now, however, I can show you, and I've got that, you saw it, that entire video series on rethinking the rut. There's a whole pile of factors that affect estrus cycling in cows. None of it has to do with moon phase. And so I will agree with you on everything that you said about what you've seen around a full moon period, or what I classify it as a bright moon period, because you know that you get that last half as the
basically those 7 days.
There you go. Because the 3 or 4 days before a full moon it's stinking bright, and then 3 or 4 days after a full moon is stinking bright. So I mean, it's a bright moon phase.
Right.
So yeah, I will agree with most of what you said as far as what I observe. Now, I will also say, however, that during a bright moon phase, sometimes that 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock time period in the middle of the day is absolutely awesome, because those elk, yes, they're out all night, they're feeding all night, they've got full bellies. Now, when it comes, the morning starts creeping in, the daylight starts, they don't have to be out there as long, and so they go to bed. They typically, what I have observed as well, is that they go to bed early. Well, their stomach, them processing and going through their rumen contents does not change with the moon cycling, so it takes them 4 to 5 hours to go through a full gut. So if they go to bed early, they get hungry early, and which usually means at about 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there, they start getting restless, And so they start getting up, and if they feel safe and comfortable well, if they feel safe, especially, you know, what you're talking about down in your area, I mean, you've got so many bulls down there that you'll get bulls in the middle of the day that start getting restless, and they'll come to a call, absolutely. So I will agree that I think the manifestation of behavior changes can happen with a full moon, but no, I do not believe anything really happens with estrus cycling.
I hunt Coues whitetail a lot, and I can tell you that, and I'll bring this full circle, but during a full moon, during those bright 7 days, even though we get out there before light and we're up on our point before it gets light, the activity level in those 7 bright days, and especially the 2 or 3 around really full type of moon, bright moon, you very rarely see any activity for the first 3 hours and the last 3 hours of the day. If I just had to choose, you know, a 4-hour period to go glass Coues whitetail during a full moon phase, I would literally show up about 10 o'clock and glass from 10 to 2. So it makes total sense that the elk are up all night, just like the Coues deer, rutting around, feeding, doing their thing because they can see, and they go to bed early, and 4 or 5 hours later, you know, during the day, they decide, okay, I've laid down, now I'm going to get up, I'm going to feed a little bit, and that makes total sense.
And obviously, hunting middle of the day, you just got to be careful of the wind. You know, I mean, the wind's swirling around. Now, I will say that I believe there is some even in the literature, in scientific literature, there is anecdotal evidence and some weak evidence to suggest that increased moonlight can increase the light that penetrates the eye, and it can. I won't say it can. There's anecdotal evidence that suggests that it might affect, say, serotonin levels or melatonin levels, and it might affect I don't know how to say it, maybe the excitability. How I've expressed it in the past is you can see a heightened level of activity around whatever cycle that they are in. So yes, you know, obviously you look at a bright moon phase at night. Well, now it's nighttime. They feel extremely safe. All right. At night, they feel extremely safe because they have better eyesight than most. And realistically for us, you know, the guys that are listening to this, guys and gals listening to us, you know, in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming that have wolves and grizzlies, skip this section. But most of us, we don't have places where elk really have to deal with predators that bad. Yeah, we've got mountain lions. Yeah, we've got black bears. Yeah, we've got coyotes. But okay. So the number one predator for elk, especially in the fall, is going to be humans, period. And when we're dealing with fall hunting season, you know that there's a lot of human scent floating around in the air, and it puts them on edge. Well, at night, you know, typically the thermals are different. You know, most people leave the field, so there's a lot less scent floating around. They feel a heck of a lot more safe to be out and about. So yes, they're going to be more apt to be out all night in a bright moon phase. But there's some evidence that suggests that maybe there is a little bit of a hormone or an enzyme or whatever secretion in the brain that can excite that behavior. And so if they were going to be bugling anyway, well, in a bright moon phase, maybe they're going to be more aggressive in their bugling or more intense in their bugling or more frequent in their bugling. If they're going to be moving from their pre-rut area to the rutting area, doing that pre-rut move, well, maybe rather than, you know, a little bit of movement activity during this time period, if it occurs if that time period that they behaviorally naturally want to do it based on photo period, if that time period just so happens to fall under a bright moon phase, well, you can see increased movement or further movement or more excited movement or whatever. So there are folks that say, and I kind of believe this, that under a bright moon phase, you can see heightened activity surrounding whatever behavioral cycle that they happen to be in. Make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I also see, during bright moon days, or excuse me, bright moon nights is obviously in Arizona, speaking, specifically Arizona, congregation areas. It just seems in full moons, they congregate more, they get together more. That's probably due to the more movement, which means they run around more, they're chasing each other, they're, trying to breed, they're trying to carry on, which probably is the reason why they're going to bed early. It all has a chain reaction. I would ask you, from everything you just said, tactically, are there things that you would do differently, archery elk hunting, in a bright moon phase rather than a dark moon phase? And I mean, the obvious one I can think of is making sure you're out there at those prime times when they're going to be most active, and recognize what they may or may not be doing because of being out all night partying with their buddies.
Yep, absolutely. Well, the number one thing, well, I guess there's not a number one thing. Let me just list them. Number one, I will spend time at night. I mean, out at night listening, and just where do they, and I will stay out all night long. I happen to work best at night anyway. I'm kind of a night owl anyway, so it doesn't really bother me. But while everybody else is headed back to camp and snuggling in their sleeping bags, I'm up there on the ridge going, okay, who sounds off first and where? Where did they sound off? Okay, and then who else? Then who else? Now where are they going? Where are they moving? How are they traveling? Okay, so I know that that's where they were bedded. Now that's where they're feeding. Okay, I know where they're traveling. So I will stay out at night and listen and really figure out what movement is going on out there, because then the flip side of that is the next morning, and sometimes I'll just make my way over to these spots at night. Just in the pitch black, I'll walk right around the elk. Make sure my wind is not blowing down into them, but I will walk right around the elk, and I will literally go to where they kicked off that night and get in there first, because I know that in the morning, where most folks are getting out of their sleeping bag and they're walking down the trail or they're walking over the ridge, and then they go, okay, now where do I need to start? Well, at that time, if you've got a little sliver of turquoise or pink in the horizon, you're already behind them. And so they're already headed to their bedding area, or they're right smack dab in their bedding area. What I will do at that time, typically the wind currents are going to still be consistent and favorable. I'll use that night, and I'll work my way over there, and I'll just get into those areas where they're headed, those bedding areas, way earlier than they do. And literally where, on a quote unquote, a dark moon phase, the elk are still out in their meadow feeding, and they've got to walk a half mile to their bedding area. Well, during a bright moon phase, they're already at their bedding area. So rather than me spending my time at that feeding area in that meadow, I'm going to already be in their bedding area. And then the other thing too is I just watch that wind all morning long, and if I can, if for some reason the wind is consistent, if I can hunt midday, I absolutely hunt midday. And then the last thing is I really do pay attention, and you should figure it out pretty quick, and it can change before, if you're dealing with a rising moon versus a setting moon. A rising moon, it is brighter during sunset, it is brighter after sunset all night long than a setting moon, because as the moon starts to set and it goes past its full, that means that moon sets earlier too. So depending on where that moon is, you might see in some areas, well, the mornings are epic, but the evenings absolutely are horrid. There's just nothing going on. Well, if that's the case, then I will just shift my hunting activity to capitalize on when they're moving, where they're moving, and if I need to sleep and catch up on sleep, I'll just do it when they're not active.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing I will say too that Dar and I have done quite a bit is, when there's quite a bit of moon and it's bright at night, with the good binoculars, we use Swarovski binoculars, but any of the European, the good binoculars, A lot of times you can get the wind right and move into those areas where the elk are at night with the moon and be looking. And I mean, you can find some of the biggest bulls at night just by using the moonlight and using good binoculars. I mean, at 150 yards, you can tell exactly how big a bull is. So I would encourage people to, the last thing you want to do is bump elk and get in there and stir them up and cause a bunch of human interference. But if you can get into those, on the edges of those open areas and listen to those different bulls bugling and say, okay, that's the big bull that we want to get in tomorrow, and sit there and listen to him interact for an hour or 2 hours, you will learn the nuances of his bugle, and that will put you a leg up in the next couple days as you're trying to target that bull because you know his voice.
Yeah.
And it absolutely can be done. We do it all the time. And it takes quite a bit of time to sit there and really listen to all the different bugles and his characteristics. Maybe he finishes on a chuckle, or maybe, you can hear those bulls and get to recognize those bulls. So that's a tactic that I would say guys could use on, brighter moon phases. And, this is all good topic of conversation. Chris, I really appreciate all of your insight, and I want to give you a chance again to tell the listeners how they can find you, and more specifically, you gave a break to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners last episode, and I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to take advantage of the elk module with the discount. I believe is $20.
It's a 20% discount, which then translates into the elk module is like $20, and then the annual full year full access is $40. So it's a good deal.
Yeah.
It's a great steal.
It's a great deal, and I want to be clear. I am not getting paid one single dime to promote your business. I believe in your business, and I just want it to be clear that I'm kind of like the guy that emailed. I want to tell my listeners, you gotta invest in this resource, because for me, it's groundbreaking. It's stuff that I wish like the email said, I wish I would have heard 15 years ago.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate it. I've over these years that we've kind of talked and I've gotten to know each other. I look at you. I mean, you guys are down there in Arizona just playing with some just giant bulls, and so I'm envious on that. But it's glad. I'm very happy to hear that some of what you've been able to pick up on the module helped you and your hunters. Again, you're talking about somebody that waited 20 years to draw a tag, and goodness gracious, you're not out there for meat at that point. You want the meat, but you're out there for a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if that can help, capitalize on that for some folks, that tickles me to no end. So, no, I appreciate it. And absolutely. If anybody just types in, they obviously just go to roehuntingresources.com, ROE huntingresources.com. And then you can just sign in or sign up. And if in there, it'll talk about a promo code, just all one word, J Scott Podcast. It'll just knock 20% off, and away you go.
And I want to make a point here. You also have a whole new bunch of videos that you are in the process of loading into the module, and which makes an already exhaustive, and I mean that in a good word, module with lots of resource there. You're loading even more content on there as we speak.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think we talked about last time and this time, I know, is the fact that, like I talk about with the glunk and some of the other stuff, I am always out there. Well, you said it yourself. The more you know, the more you learn, you realize the less you know. And I think the relevant fact of that is you're always learning and you're always testing what you've known and trying to prove it or disprove it. And that's kind of what we do with this stuff, is try to get the best information out there. And I just loaded a video that updates one of the vocalizations that I talk about. It's the vocalization that most people talk about when they talk about an estrus mu or estrus scream or estrus whine or estrus whatever. I don't buy into that, and I can show you why on video. However, I just posted an update to that I think people are going to find interesting, because the more that we watch it, I'm not convinced that that's a standalone vocalization. I think it might just be a progression of one of the previous vocalizations we already talked about. So that's the type of stuff that we're always doing in there. We're always adding more stuff and trying to push the envelope on what we know, what we understand, and give you guys the best information possible. So, yeah, I posted an update that very well may change or contradict or at least supplement some of the previously held stuff that we talked about before. So,
well, I appreciate all your work, and thanks for your support of the podcast,
yeah.
and continue doing the great work that you're doing. And I know we've got a lot of other topics to talk about that we'll talk about on future episodes, one of which is I get a lot of questions about early season elk tactics, and we'll have to cover that in another time.
Yeah.
So until I talk to you next time, buddy, God bless you, and I appreciate all the hard work. I know you've got a seminar in Denver coming up here soon, and wish you the best with that. And I know, I've heard through the grapevine, I have not been to the seminars, but I hear you always have a packed house. So wish you the best with that, and travel safe.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. And I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thanks for listening to the J. Scott Outdoors Western Big Game Hunting and Fishing Podcast, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today.